Hello and welcome to the Family Business Show. Today my special guest is Maryanne DiBiase of Winco Engineering, and we're going to talk about planning, communication and perseverance. I just want to thank our sponsors for today, and today's sponsor is Tech, the Executive Connection. I've been associated with Tech for many years. I've been both a member and a facilitator, a Tech chair. Tech is all about better decisions and better leaders. I think from my experience, the leadership and the learnings and the experience of the leaders of these groups have made a very big difference, a huge difference in my business life. And I think that if you contact them on www.tech.com.au, you can connect with Tech, the organisation, and I think it would be in your interests. So thank you, Tech. Welcome back to the show. We're going to be talking about communication, planning and perseverance with Maryanne DiBiase. Welcome, Maryanne.
Thank you, John.
Maryanne, Winco is the family business name. Can you tell me about where it started, how it started?
Yep. Mum and Dad, so Mario and Lena Pecker, started as a partnership in 1974, and then they incorporated the company in 1980. So we've been going for 38 years, and Dad works in the business, and he's now 73 and still works in the business. And Mum, of course, was a silent partner in as many of these family businesses start out to be. I'm second generation. My two younger brothers work in the business every day. I work part-time with the business, but oversee the family of wealth and the business as a whole, because we have other investments and things like that. So Winco is a heavy engineering company, and it has three divisions. So heavy engineering is what my dad started with on one property in O'Connor. He subsequently expanded to another property across the road, and we've been there since 1974.
So three divisions, heavy engineering.
Yes.
That's making big cylinders, big sheets of metal, anything that's made out of metal.
Metal, yeah. We have capability to roll and press heavy pieces of steel, thicknesses that quite a few businesses can't do. So we have a bit of a niche area with that. We also have two other divisions. One is onshore offshore services, which is dealing with the mining sector and the oil and gas sector. So that's been running for a number of years, and just recently we started a rubber lining division just to complement the other two divisions. So yes.
Okay. So it's a large business. How many people would you employ?
We employ 50 at least. It can grow up to, depending on contracts up north, when we have some contracts with the onshore offshore division, that grows, but they're usually casual employees. So yes, we have a large employee base.
You mentioned two brothers working in the business, Dad's in the business.
Yeah.
Where does everybody fit? Okay. You mentioned that you look after the wealth and the finance.
Yes.
Dad's in there every day. What does he do? And the two brothers.
Okay. So my brother Paul, he is the general manager of Winco, and Mario is the technical manager. And like I said, I'm in the finance section, so we all complement each other. Dad has sort of pulled away a little bit, but he's still involved heavily. He is there 6 days a week, if not 7. But he tends to just do his own thing at the moment. But he still is consulted on a lot of major points. He has a wealth of knowledge, as you would imagine.
So having Dad involved, as long as Dad's been involved, and him creating the business, in the last, say, 10 years, have you had much growth?
We've had exponential growth. We've been growing, I think, a bit too fast. We've taken on quite a few big projects and worked well. They've worked well. There have been some, hiccups along the way, and learning processes and things like that. So, yeah, it's been a learning curve in the last 10 years. It's been quite a big learning curve.
So Maryanne, tell us about your upbringing, growing up in Perth, how you ended up in the business, your education.
Okay. So we had I basically started doing the books of Winco when they got incorporated. So I started doing cash book in 1980. I think I still got the original cash book that I started, and loved numbers. So once I left school, I decided I would like to become an accountant. That was a way I wanted to go. So studied accountancy and then went to work for an accounting firm, mainly dealing with tax. In the meantime, also working in the business. We've always had accountants or bookkeepers in the business, so I'm not needed to be there every day. Then I suppose after I had my own children, working part-time, then started working in the family business. It was, for me, it was an easier road than my brothers. They ended up not knowing exactly what they wanted to do, so they just fell into the business. So they worked their way up to where they are now. I don't know if it was expected of them to go into the business, but it was certainly there, and that's where they ended up.
Have you had conversations with Dad about that time where, growing up and he was at work all the time probably, about what he wanted in those days?
No, we never discussed it, not really. He never said to me in particular. I don't know if he ever had those conversations with my brothers. However, with me, no, I got the degree and I went to work, and so that was part of it. Although you mentioned that Dad worked a lot of hours then, he actually works more hours now than he did then. We used to do quite a few things on the weekends as a family. He had a boat. At one stage, he had a hovercraft, and so we managed to do a lot of family time when we were younger. Yeah.
That's not a normal sort of family toy. Did Dad build that?
No, Dad has an addiction to auctions, and that came up on an auction, and so he purchased it. And we used to go down to the salt flats down near Baldivis and Rockingham there and go there. So that was quite fun. So, yeah.
So your brother's education, there was nothing really said, but with them not showing any desire to go anywhere else, it was comfortable for them to come in. It was almost an expectation.
I would say so, yeah. They had to work there. We all did during our school holidays. We always had to put a few hours in. Like I said, I used to do the books, whether I did them after hours or on the weekends for a while there. My brothers had to work during the school holidays, so I think there was an expectation that they would go there. I suppose with my father thinking that it would go on to another generation.
Did they work directly with your dad, or did they work under managers? How did they skill themselves up?
They worked with Dad. They did work with Dad directly, and they also worked with because at that stage we only really had the heavy engineering side when they started. So they worked with the foreman. Paul ended up doing a lot of estimating, so he worked in the office quite a lot. Mario has a very good technical background, and that's why he's technical manager now. He worked a lot with the workshop foreman to help develop that with him. But both of them really essentially worked in the office.
How much business conversation went on over the dinner table?
Quite a bit. Yeah, we did. And then it got to the point that, of course, Mum would say, I don't want to talk about work anymore. I don't want you to talk about work anymore, if it ever got heated. Not that it did a lot, but just the conversations would always continue into the evening. Mum sort of would put a kibosh on that.
So Mum stopped it when she thought it was
Yeah.
necessary. So was it 7 days a week you would almost end up talking business at the table?
No, not necessarily. It was mainly just after work, having dinner at that time. And then the weekends, like I said, we actually were, the boys would be playing sport or we'd go out.
As you grew older, you're married now,
Yes.
and your brothers are married now. Through those stages of dating and the like, your brothers stayed in the business. You were working somewhere else, and then you chose, or did Dad ask you one day to come back and do some work at?
No.
Or was it?
It was just I always had an interest. I was always involved in some way. That I physically didn't work in the office. I still had knowledge of what was going on, preparing all the information for tax returns for the family and for the business and the few investments that we have. I've always been involved with that. So
It's interesting. It just sort of crossed my mind. Would you consider yourself the wealth advisor for the family, understanding the numbers and where the finances come and go from, how the trading is requiring funds when it needs the funds, and how we can distribute the funds if it needs to be distributed?
Exactly, that's exactly what I do, and I'm lucky in the sense that my family trusts me.
To me, that is one of the highest qualities you can ever achieve in a family business, being trusted with the money. So from a communication point of view, how often do the family talk about the money? Do we communicate about that once a year, once a month, on a board meeting, a profit and loss?
We probably tend to discuss it, of course, with any investments, and as such, we have bank reviews and things like that. So there is a discussion at least once a year of how things are progressing or how things are developing. But in recent times, we've had some growth that we've needed funding for and things like that. So there's been a lot more discussion on how funds are distributed or funds are needed, and so there's been conversations between the family, of course, on how that's going to happen.
Okay. And when the family comes together and we're making these new decisions or deciding on things, the planning that goes into these things, there's obviously conversations and communication.
Yeah.
Does any of those conversations, do they come into the home as well, or generally they're staying in the workplace?
They're staying in the workplace. We've made a conscious decision as adults, us children as adults, that the conversations need to happen at work and that they don't happen at home. We leave home for home, and that my mum is happy when we have family lunches, and it's not discussed.
What a great idea to be able to separate work and home, work and family.
Yeah. It takes work, though. It does take work. It's not as simple as that. I mean, it does come up every now and then, of course, but yeah.
Okay, thanks. We're going to take a break now, and we'll come back shortly to the Family Business Show with Maryanne DiBiase. Welcome back to the Family Business Show with my guest Maryanne DiBiase of Winco. So Maryanne, challenges, some of the things that have happened, some of the things that have put pressure on the family over the last 20 or 30 years that obviously you've been able to overcome. Just tell us some of the challenges that the families had to face.
Okay, so I would say the challenges have sort of been the last 10 to 15 years. Prior to that, business was running smoothly, a small operation. then we've introduced general managers into the business that are non-family members, and having people work with my father who the knowledge is great but still wants to do business his way. And so trying to modernise the business and trying to professionalise the business so that because we're dealing with the mining and oil and gas industries, we're dealing with big players. So to try and modernise it, we've had challenges with my father being the way he is. He's
would you say old school?
Very old school, yes, very old school. Accepting of bringing in technology and things like that is fine, but not understanding sometimes some of the workplace things that come into place now, like OH&S, and I mean we're very lucky. We've got a very good safety record, but now with all the red tape, as they would say, he finds that quite challenging. So he has his way of thinking, and we're trying to help, try and get him to understand that that's the way things are done now. So it's been a bit of a challenge. He, as I mentioned before, he loves auctions, and he purchases a lot of items, and the majority of the time they are needed and they will be used, but sometimes he will buy things that really are not needed, and that's had a little bit of an impact on cash flow.
Grown quite a bit. Is that double, triple, 3 times?
I would say, yeah. So we've doubled, and now we've tripled. So it's been
that's huge growth.
Huge growth.
So what's changed really with the growth? Is it the type of contracts that you're taking on, or is it the quality of the human resources that you have, or
it's the contracts that we take on. So we've taken on quite large contracts, and of course they start off a few million, and then they double, triple in size because they add sections to it. So those have been great challenges, and finding the staff to handle that has been quite difficult. We've also, as I mentioned, started a new division, and that involved taking on stock items, which we were always a service business, and so that's been taking on stock items, and so that's been a challenge. With the result of that, my husband joined the company 2 years ago.
Another family member joining the family business, right?
He joined the company 2 years ago to work with that because he's been in logistics and stock business for over 20 years. So he had the knowledge base for that, and was asked by my brother, Paul, if he would like to come and help. So, yeah.
Well, that's a big change.
It is
and I'm sure that's a challenge too, to bring in one of the relatives from outside to come inside.
Yes.
How did your husband handle that change?
He actually relished it. He wanted a challenge, and I must admit it's been a challenge. He works quite closely with my father, and that's actually been really good as we call it a buffer between my dad and us, his children, because of course sometimes in his eyes he doesn't see us as employees or colleagues. He sees us as his children, of course. And so with Rob in the mix, Robert's my husband, it's been quite good because he's able to challenge Dad in a way, to challenge him to change a little bit.
Dad's in his 70s. Mm-hmm. How much of a challenge is that, and what sort of planning have you put in place or discussed about the next 10 or 20 years?
The discussion between for succession has been going on for at least 5 years. Dad tends to say yes, I agree, but then he he's still holding on quite tightly to the business. So we've had discussions about how the business, if the business is to grow any further or to stay the same, and what it looks like in 5 years' time. It's still a little bit up in the air with regards to what we see and how it's going to look. Of course, you mentioned I've got children, and my brothers both have children as well. They range in age. There's a 16-year gap between the eldest and the youngest, so there's quite a big age difference. And the conversation really hasn't been had with the third generation to see if that's something that they would like to continue. So it's still a little bit up in the air. You know, we're looking at all the correct things, doing some planning, of course, but there still is that little bit of uncertainty in exactly what's going to happen. So just continuing to persevere with the conversations.
I'm hearing a number of challenges that you face almost on a daily basis. Yep. So in dealing with family, in dealing with dad, in dealing with managing the day-to-day of the business, how do you find a balance in all of this?
I would say I'm sort of one of the luckier ones because I don't work day-to-day in the business. We've been finding a challenge at the moment we're just doing that whole discussion of working on the business rather than in the business, but finding the staff to fit in well with everything so that we can have time to work on the business. It's been a bit hard. Personally, like I mentioned, I'm not there every day, so I have other things that I can do and that I do. I dance, I love to dance, and so that's my outlet.
Let's take a break. We'll come back shortly and we will talk about some of the ways that Maryanne and her family have addressed the challenges in the family business. Welcome back to the interview with Maryanne DiBiase of Winco Heavy Engineering. Maryanne, tell us about some of the successes you've had. So all of the wins, or not all of the wins, but the wins and how the family handles the changes of these challenges.
Well, as I mentioned previously, we've had a number of large contracts. We were involved with quite recently the Beanie Water Treatment Plant, and we received quite a pat on the back. You know, the job was done in a timely fashion and very high standards, so we've become quite known for our services in that area. Like I mentioned quite early on, that Dad has developed quite a niche business in regards to the heavy engineering with some of the machines that he actually has built to handle quite heavy steels of quite thickness. So that's always been something that we're very proud of. All these successes are great. They just buoy up the whole business, of course, you know, and even the workers on the floor who get to see that, you know, we've developed something really, really special.
So you communicate with the staff, you share it, you know, the wins, everybody knows about the big wins.
Oh, for sure, everyone knows about the big wins. Of course, they get to know about some of the things that haven't gone well. But that's
they have to know about
yeah,
those
exactly
too.
Right. But we try to mention that. I mean, we've got some staff members that have been with us for over 30 years, so they know, you know, they're like family, and so they celebrate our wins as well.
So part of the success that I'm hearing is the loyalty.
For sure.
Is the loyalty to the business, to your dad, to the family?
I think it's been more to Dad. Dad's always been someone that will have his workers working. There were tough times, you know, during the bus. You know, we all celebrate the booms, but during the bus, my dad would very rarely let go of any of his employees. He would always keep them employed. He and the loyalty is to him. They still call him Mr. Pecker. So, and some of them have been with him for, like I said, 30 years.
It sounds like your dad has a pretty big heart.
Mm.
With the whole family, the culture that you've created, that would have to be considered at least one success, wouldn't it?
Oh, definitely, definitely. We do work together, and we see each other quite a lot, and it hasn't dampened our wanting to be together as a family. So I think that's a success. The kids love to see, the grandkids love to see their grandparents and love to be around them.
One of the things that we talked about was perseverance.
Mm-hmm.
There's a part of perseverance in this loyalty and trust that I'm hearing in the business. If we wanted to give an example of perseverance, how could we talk about perseverance in that sense in the business, do you think?
Like we mentioned, celebrating the wins and the successes, but we've had some big, losses along the way. But we've always had, and I suppose that's come from Dad, the perseverance to keep going with what we're doing. Because we've got the 3 divisions, certain divisions not making as much profit as other divisions or whatever, but we've always kept them and persevered with what we're doing because we can see the bigger picture.
Your brothers, their commitment to the family business
Mm-hmm.
is a strength, and the people that they work with is also a strength. How do you see the next couple of years, 3-5 years? Is it more perseverance or is it more planning?
We're actually in more planning stage to see because like Dad's in his 70s, as you mentioned, like wanting him to enjoy his time. He is actually away at the moment, which is wonderful. I'm glad to see that he's away. He still has access to computers, and so he's still doing some auction purchasing. But he is enjoying his time away, and so we would like to see that increase, and so that he doesn't feel that he needs to be there. He does enjoy it. So at the end of the day, it's more for him he enjoys being there. He enjoys, we call it tinkering, but also imparting his knowledge when asked. He really enjoys that. So with regards to my brothers and myself, we are planning for the future to see, and like I mentioned earlier, it was just to see whether we continue the business or we look at different avenues. However, it's an ongoing process at the moment.
So the plan is definitely staying together as a siblings
for sure,
and
yes.
keep the business going and driving forward.
Yes, definitely.
Great. Where in the next couple of years do you see other opportunities? Are there other opportunities in those areas you're working in? Or do you see maybe more diversification?
Definitely not more diversification. We're happy with the mix that we have now. We're more consolidating at the moment. With the high growth came certain issues that we had to work through. So I think if we maintain where we're at, taking on contracts that we know that we can do well, we will just keep it at a level that's maintainable and not so stressful.
Do your children and do your brother's children come in and work Christmas times, holiday times these days?
My children do. They're a bit older, so they come in during the school holidays and the other time that they've got free. One's at university, so he has some free time. But we made a conscious decision as siblings to decide that if the children come in, that they get paid at whatever their age group would get paid. And if they wanted to come into the business, if they want a management level position, then they would have to work somewhere else prior to coming into Winco. But if they want to work on the floor or the floor in the workshop, then they can come into the business. So Yes, they do come in. They do visit the littler ones. My brother's children are quite young. They do visit their grandfather. They um, watch him on the forklift, and they go up and watch him and help him press buttons on the crane. So those sort of things, they know that that's where everyone works, and that's the family business.
The future growth of the business, you're consolidating now. How many people get involved in the planning? Do you have outside family members involved in the planning, or is it just the family that does the planning?
At the moment, it's the family that's making the planning. We do involve a couple of outside help, of course, just to give us a little bit of advice on either what the market is doing or what we can sustain.
So this is the professionalising you talked about earlier.
Definitely.
So you're moving in that path.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, that's great. We're going to take another break and we'll come back shortly to Maryanne DiBiase from Winco. And welcome back to the show with our guest, Maryanne DiBiase. Maryanne, in this last little section that we're going to chat about, some advice that you might give other families, second generation people working in their family businesses.
One of the big things is communication. I feel that the ability to talk to your siblings if you're a second generation, and even if you're with your parents that are in the business, there needs to be that communication of where you're sitting in the business, or how the business is, or how the parents would like to see you in the business. So that's the biggest thing. At first, we never really spoke about things; we just did, and we just listened to Dad. But now that we're older, and of course quite involved in the business, there's that need for constant communication, constant talking between all the parties.
You mentioned just off the record yelling at the kids, yelling at the siblings. Sometimes it can come to that, can't it?
It did in the beginning. I'm the oldest, of course, so I want to exert my being the girl. But lately, of course, we've all matured, so of course we tend to discuss things. It might be heatedly, but most of the time, there's a frank discussion if we need to have that.
Communication is the great one. I totally agree there. Have you learned lessons about finance and how we share between the family members and how we talk about that, the sharing?
Yeah, that's something that has always come down from our parents. My parents have always been one to say that we are all equal. I've learnt along the way that equal may not be fair or is fair, or there's always that what is equal may not be fair. So there has been conversations in the last, let's say, last five years about finances. We're a very lucky family, and so there's been open communications, of course, with partners of the siblings. It's always can be a little bit difficult, but I think if you keep the communication lines open, then it's going to save on a lot of problems.
That's an interesting little conversation that you mentioned, the partners of the siblings.
Yeah.
Is there something you've learned in how to manage that? Because that is generally a very difficult area.
It is a difficult area, or can be a difficult area. For us, it's been a matter of, as I mentioned right at the beginning, the trust that my siblings have in me, and also that I have in them, that they will discuss things with their partners. We've not really sat down as a group to have a discussion about things, but it's always been the three of us with Dad most of the time having a discussion of things, and then that's communicated to our partners.
Where to now? Where to for Winco? 3 divisions: heavy engineering, onshore, offshore engineering, and the rubber linings. Consolidation was the conversation in the middle, but future, consolidate for a while and then start to grow again.
We don't. We feel we're comfortable where we are at the moment. So it's more. Our focus is more on maintaining where we are, and also going towards that professionalism and that putting the correct processes in place for anyone else that comes into the business may come into the business so that they can navigate the way easier, and also bringing in people that will allow us as a family to work on the business, because that's been we've been so busy working in the business that's been an issue, so that we need to look at that. I can't say no growth, because if an opportunity presents itself, then we will always go for it.
From a family point of view, Dad comes back soon.
Yes.
He'll be back at the office, and Dad's future keeps going, still doing what he's doing.
Yes.
So Dad's going to be there forever.
Yeah.
Okay.
We've come to the realisation that that's Dad. That's his. He makes him happy. It does. He actually enjoys it. Keeps him moving. Keeps him going. Keeps his brain going. We would like to see him enjoy his life a little bit more trips. So yeah, if we can sneak him in a couple of more trips, it'd be lovely. And if he sees that things have been fine while he's been away the last 4 weeks, then I think he'll continue to do that. But he is a wealth of knowledge, and if we can tap into that and continue to tap into that, then we'll hold us in good stead. So.
Thanks very much, Maryanne.
You're very welcome.
So we've talked about planning, communication, and perseverance, and I think Maryanne, her family, and the business have shown not just perseverance, but resilience as well. Thanks very much for coming in.
You're welcome.
And I look forward to speaking with you again soon. And you. I just want to thank our sponsors for today, and today's sponsor is Tech, the Executive Connection. I've been associated with Tech for many years. I've been both a member and a facilitator, a Tech chair. Tech is all about better decisions and better leaders. I think from my experience, the leadership and the learnings and the experience of the leaders of these groups have made a very big difference, a huge difference in my business life. And I think that if you contact them on www.tech.com.au, you can connect with Tech, the organisation, and I think it would be in your interests. So thank you, Tech.